Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. Today, I'd like to speak about the root cause of the problem that I have identified in the previous videos, namely how the Romanian elite functions and how it sees itself. And this is particularly important because Romania is a very different country from the countries that surround it. Its entire history was very different, and it inherited this elitist model in which the people who are at the top of society have this groupthink. They think all in the same direction, and if you don't think in the same direction, you are essentially ejected from the intellectual class, from the so-called elite. And this way of thinking has a lot to do with serving a foreign master, serving a locus of prestige. The Romanian elite developed itself throughout the centuries in a very different fashion than the Bulgarian elite or the Hungarian elite or the Serbian elite. You can take any example from the region. Romania is unique, and this is why Romania is evolving on a very unique path. And in my opinion, it is very close to establishing a totalitarian system. I've mentioned in the past videos how this paradigm of the Romanian elites is now that every possible dissenting political opinion is part of Russian disinformation, and how they're trying to institutionalize some mechanisms to counteract that. Of course, you cannot speak about any democracy, any type of democratic life, once you censor speech to the extent that you equate political opposition to being an agent of hybrid warfare of the enemy. So, in my opinion, if in 2024 in the presidential elections 2 candidates were not allowed to run, well, one was allowed and one was subsequently disqualified because of their geopolitical alignment, I'm pretty sure that in the 2028 elections it's going to be even worse. Political parties will not be able to register, and perhaps their leaders will even be arrested because they practice opposition speech. So only the parties that practice the speech of the so-called pro-European coalition will be allowed to run. So essentially clone parties of the parties that are already in government. And opposition parties will just be deemed vehicles of Russia, vehicles of the enemy. And of course, they will not be allowed to run because this is the whole idea of fighting disinformation, fighting hybrid warfare. If Russia attacks you through the ballot box, then you have to respond, right? This is the logic. So essentially, the Romanian elites are caught in this narrative. They're caught in this mass formation, like Matthias Desmet puts it, that the fact that the majority of the Romanians do not share their view, also regarding Ukraine, but not only, it started during the vaccine crusade, or perhaps even earlier with the anti-corruption drive. They have come to the conclusion that if the majority of the population does not share their conclusions, the democratic way is to impose their conclusions, even though you would say that democracy stems from the opinion of the majority of the people. Well, not in Romania. In Romania, the elites consider themselves democratic. Axiomatically speaking, they consider themselves democratic. And as a consequence, their preference is the democratic one. It doesn't matter that it's not shared with the masses. The only question is how to get the masses on board. And it's a very overt process. They openly admit it. They come from the premise that the masses are uneducated and they don't know what's good for them, and the elite knows, and it just needs some instruments, some tools to manufacture the consent of the masses so that they also go along with it, and this is democracy, in their opinion. The problem is, of course, the United States also does this, but the United States does this to preserve empire. Okay, you can argue that this empire, this American empire, does not benefit the common people too much. Well, probably it doesn't, but still, the empire that the American elites are trying to manufacture consent for is the American empire. Whereas the Romanian elites function in a very different way. They always had a locus of prestige from which they copied. And not only did they copy institutions, they also saw themselves as the willing vassals of that locus of prestige and of willing servants, of willing agents. And they saw no problem with that. So in the 19th century, being an agent of France was not deemed anti-Romanian. It was not deemed against national interest. On the contrary, it was deemed the most patriotic thing possible. Romanian elites throughout the centuries have never been linked to the national interest, because the national interest is the interest of the plebs, the interest of the majority of the people. And they were never linked with it. The only possible exception is the times of socialism. But even then, they also functioned in this same manner of worshipping the locus of prestige. And when the locus of prestige became internal under Ceausescu, this was basically the only time in Romanian history when the locus of prestige that needed to be worshipped was a domestic one. What came out was a fiasco, horrible personality cults, and those very people that basically wrote such disgusting pieces of propaganda praising the genius of the Carpathians and so on, discarded him the day that he lost power, and used their talents with the new leadership, because this is how the elite functions in Romania. The Romanian elite does not think for itself. Members of the Romanian elite are very wary of contradiction, of dissenting opinions, and they just emulate the discourse of prestige. And this is how they came to the situation now, which I find absolutely baffling, looking at it from outside. But somehow there is an internal logic to it, and they're very caught inside this inside this logic. That the locus of prestige is Ukraine. I'm pretty sure that some legislation will be enacted in the coming months as to criminalize criticism of Ukraine, just like criticism of Israel is criminalized. Because this, as the years went by from when the war in Ukraine started, there was a lot of propaganda from the United States, from the European Union, from these media outlets funded by these enablers of the conflict, to picture Ukraine only in the most positive light possible. So throughout the years, the Romanian elite has accustomed itself to essentially see Ukraine and whatever comes out of Ukraine as holy, as something that needs to be worshipped. Whenever Ukraine says something about Romania, that is axiomatically true, and the Romanian elite jumps on the bandwagon with it. If and when, because this is now the case, when Ukraine says that the Romanian political opposition is an agent of Russia and is practicing discourse which serves Russian interests, and it is using Russian talking points, and it is in the service of the enemy. When Ukraine says this, the Romanian political class, in power, automatically believes it, and it tries to implement measures so as to counteract that, so to increase political repression against the opposition. And it went so far that the leader of the opposition, George Simion, who was the runner-up in the presidential elections, was routinely accused by even by governmental sources that he's an agent of Moscow because Ukraine says so. So the Romanian elite is more willing to side. I mean, yeah, it was more willing then. Now it is more than willing. It's just a reflex, an automatic reflex, to side with Ukraine against the political representatives of the majority of the population. There's no conspiracy involved. I don't think the Zelensky regime bought the Romanian elite. No. The Romanian elite has this sunflower mechanism. It always seeks the sun. It always seeks the locus of prestige, and it always seeks what it considers to be the holy ass that they need to kiss. And the holy ass has been France, it has been Germany, it has been the Soviet Union. And now the holy ass, because Brussels is a rather weak center of power. Of course, the Holy Ass is in principle Brussels. It is also in principle the United States. But these two Holy Asses have also a proxy in the region, which was portrayed only in the most favorable terms since 2022. And the Romanian elite started regarding Ukraine as being the holy ass that needs to be kissed. And this led to a lot of consequences. Aid to Ukraine is a state secret, so members of parliament, members of the European Parliament tried to find out how much does Romania give to Ukraine. And it's a state secret. Why? Well, you can imagine why. I mean, Romania is not in an economic crisis for nothing. It does not have the highest debt levels, the highest budget deficit, and the highest inflation in the European Union for nothing. Romania is offering a lot of aid to Ukraine, and Ukraine says, and the Romanian elite parrots, that questioning aid for Ukraine is part of Russian hybrid warfare. Therefore, you cannot question aid for Ukraine, because you out yourself as a Russian agent. So therefore, this mechanism through which there are huge budgetary allocations to Ukraine must not be questioned and must not be stopped. If you try to stop it, you're an agent of Russia. Of course, the Ukrainians, being intelligent, they use this to their benefit. I mean, in this equation, it's not Ukraine who is to blame. If I were the leader of Ukraine, I would do exactly the same. We have this mountain of stupidity next to us called Romania. Those people are complete imbeciles. They regard our opinions to be superior to the opinions of their own citizens, and they regard our interests to be superior to the interests of their own citizens. They govern on behalf of us, so why not play the game? We keep on telling them that Russia attacks them, that Russia has this network of disinformers in their society, that basically everybody who opposes us is an agent of Russia, and they believe it. So how can you not exploit this? Ukraine is a country at war. It's obviously understandable that Ukraine does this. What is not forgivable is that the Romanian elites go for it, and the final destination of this chain of thought, of this logic, when it will be taken to its final conclusion, will be that Ukraine will engineer Romania's entry into the war on its behalf. Because, I mean, I've said this to many Romanians, and everybody was dismissive of me, saying, but we don't want to fight. as if it were a matter of choice. As if those people that are bussified in Ukraine want to fight. No, it's not a matter of choice. It's a matter of a mechanism that is put in place and slowly encroaches even more, and there's more and more state capture. And this happens through the psychology of the elites, of the Romanian elites, who have this need, this inherent need to copy the homework from somewhere. First of all, this is how they also formed themselves intellectually, and to put themselves at the service of somebody, to find a master. And this logic functions very well with Ukraine, because Ukraine was praised by this propaganda machine of the West to be so amazing, to have the best institutions, to fight the behemoth to such a successful level, and so on and so forth. And the Romanian elite customized itself to worshipping the new ass. The previous ass, America, is now run by Trump, which is, it's a bit disgusting. Still, many do it, but ass worshipping for America has taken a back seat right now. Brussels is a weak center of power right now. Of course, it is still important, but it's not like there are only favorable pieces of news regarding Brussels and regarding what new successes it has. Whereas Ukraine, it is defeating the behemoth. And with Ukraine, the news record is spotless, absolutely spotless. And even though the Zelensky regime is not representing the will of the Ukrainian people, and there have been no elections for 2 years and so on and so forth, the Romanian elite, because it functions in this way psychologically, and I will explain in this video how this came to be, historically speaking, The Romanian elite just worships whatever comes out of Ukraine. It considers the Ukrainian authorities like the Oracle of Delphi, like Boca de la Verità. Just whatever comes out of it is the truth. And they would implement any kind of measures suggested by Ukraine against their own population without ever doubting that it might be wrong. I saw this also during the vaccine crusade. This is when I realized the totalitarian nature of this phenomenon, because I was inside of it, not only because I was inside Romania, but the people doing it were people that I knew for a long time, classmates of mine, colleagues, ex colleagues from high school, from university, from all sorts of other places. I've also worked for these National Endowment for Democracy funded think tanks. I know the people there. So I was part of this environment, and I could see how they all congregated to the same wrong conclusion, like it was during the vaccine crusade, to persecute the unvaccinated. Why? Because this is what was told from the West, from abroad. This is what prestige countries like the ones in Western Europe were doing, and in Canada and in Australia and in the democratic states. So it was the normal course. It was the normal course of action to take. Logic was never a part of the equation. It was never a part of the thought process. It was all about copying. So if Australia makes camps for the unvaccinated, if Canada does it, if California does it, if Germany does it, Italy does it, France does it, their natural conclusion, and this is what they were telling me, we have to do it as well, because what are we smarter than them? This was the question. And this is how they function. They essentially they know they're imposters. They know that they do not think. They come to the same conclusion because they imitate the same place. They imitate the same source, and they see dissenting opinion as blasphemy. Literally, they see it as basically something that needs to be taken out in order to ensure purity of opinion. And this has to do with a mechanism that I will go on to explain, how the elite class reproduces itself. It reproduces itself through young people with aspirations who have to parrot the speech in order to become accepted in this intellectual class, and this so-called intellectual class. And the young people that are tempted by this route know themselves that they are imposters, in the sense that they have excellent grades, but they never thought for themselves. They just imitated the content, essentially, for the exam. And they have this CV with flashy points on it, but they never stood for a second to actually reflect on whether or not they believe the stuff. They basically regurgitated it, and this is how they became part of the elite. They parroted the speech, and once they became part of the elite, it was their number one priority to stay in the elite. So not having dissenting opinions and not thinking is an essential part to make sure that you don't get discarded from the elite. And if the elite worships an external locus of power and just does what the external locus of power wants from them, then that's the game to play. And whoever questions this is not part of the educated class. In the years before the war, how the rejection of the opinions of the dissenters took place was to deny their educational credentials. So, okay, we have this is the opinion of the educated class. If you do not share it, then you're not educated. Ever since the war, and because many educated people actually go against the dominant opinion of the so-called educated class, the discourse changed. Actually, also during the vaccine crusade, there were elements of this discourse change, because I got accused of being part of Russian propaganda because of my skepticism towards the vaccines long before the war in Ukraine started. But ever since the war in Ukraine started, it became obvious. So whoever has doubts about Romania's involvement in the war, about Romania's sacrifice on the altar of defending Ukraine, is a Russian agent. So they ran away with this narrative that whoever has dissenting viewpoints works for Russia. No evidence was required because evidence is hard to gather and words are cheap, words are basically free. So while other countries support Ukraine for various calculations, and therefore because it's support from rational reasons stemming from a rational logic, it also has limits that have to do with how much the country believes to gain from this strategic support of Ukraine and to help ensure a strategic defeat of Russia. In the case of Romania, the Romanian elites governing the country and the so-called civil society that supports them do not regard this help for Ukraine as some sort of rational thing to do. When asked, they could provide rational reasons. They could provide upsides of this help, but they will never go into the downside, and they will never allow a calculation-based approach on the matter because they regard it as just their holy duty. They regard it as a holy duty to be faithful to this goal. And when speaking of costs that Romania might incur, they react as if you electrocute them. They react as if somebody very pious to a cause hears blasphemy. There is no room for rational discussion. It's just this is why it's also very easy for them to label any kind of dissenters to this policy as being traitors, because it's such a strong rejection mechanism that they do not regard the people who say that this is perhaps a wasteful calculation, that perhaps what we are embarking upon is a ruinous strategy. They see it as effectively trashing something holy, and they react in consequence. They react as if you cursed something very dear to them. And the reason is that they have become so invested in this, and they have become so morally obliged in their heads to keep on supporting Ukraine, whatever the costs, and whatever the costs to the local population, that they are willing to sacrifice the Romanian population without any hesitation for this sake, because this is how Romanian elites have functioned in general. There is a whole history. I think I've made this introduction way too long, so I think I will go into the history of the Romanian elite and how it treated the population in another episode. I just wanted to point out now that this is the root of the problem. The root of the problem is the way that the Romanian elites do not stem directly from the people in a democratic fashion, like it happened with the countries around us, at least the ones that were in the Ottoman Empire. But in our process of nation building, we inherited the elites, which were not Romanian, and which never really became Romanian. They never really acculturalized themselves. To this day, there's this mechanism, whereas their ethnic dimension disappeared. The Romanian elites no longer have a different ethnicity, but they behave as if. They regard themselves as if the great masses of the Romanian people, the great unwashed, the great uneducated, are of one people, and they are of a different people, and they have a different interest, and they're different. Their interest is to serve this foreign paymaster, this foreign locus of prestige, in which they are also invested emotionally. This is the thing. It's not just that they are comprador elites. They are comprador elites, but at the same time, because they also receive stipends from these locus, from this loci of prestige that they worship, but they're also emotionally invested in it, in them, and this is what gives them identity. So the biggest component of the identity of the Romanian elites is this foreign element, the element that they belong somewhere else, that they serve a different master, that they should instrumentalize the state that they allegedly democratically rule to the interest of that foreign paymaster, and that this is their role and purpose. This is why it's very hard to convince them and to put them on a national agenda, because they know their purpose, their place is somewhere else. They belong in a different place, and they are there to serve that different locus of prestige. And they're not faithful to a certain one. It's they're very easily co-optable, especially because they regard prestige in itself. They regard prestige for the sake of prestige, and while they served France in one era, they might serve Germany in another, they might serve the United States, or they might serve whatever is indicated to them through these mechanisms of prestige allocation, so to say. That is the prestigious target to support. Probably in 10 years from now, when there will be the war between the United States and China, they will be ardent supporters of Taiwan, and they will write odes about the bravery of the Taiwanese people and so on and so forth. Because if the channels where they get their information signal to them that this is this is the morally superior position to take, this is what they will take. And whereas various countries in the region, various European countries might support Ukraine for various goals with respect to Russia, but they might have their own limits. In the case of Romania, Romania is a vehicle that blindly supports Ukraine, and that can go as far as committing national suicide on the altar of helping Ukraine. And because these elites do not trust the institutions of the Romanian state, they are more than willing to borrow the opinions, the positions of the Ukrainian institutions, and to regard them as somehow infallible, and to divert domestic Romanian policy according to the lines dictated by Ukraine, which they're in the process of doing. So I will save for next time the effort of explaining the whole history of how the Romanian elites came to be in a very different fashion than the ones stemming out of the peasantry in Serbia and Bulgaria. And if you like what I do, like, share, subscribe. If you want to support me financially, you'll find a link in the description of the channel how to do so. And until next time, take care.